The Beyond the Fame podcast is fed by Lido Pizza. Lido Pizza never cuts corners. For menu and locations, visit LidoPizza.com. And of course, this podcast would not be possible without our longtime title sponsor, the Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia. March's dining special events include March Mania food, drink, and viewing party packages in the all-new ESPN Bet, the 20th through the 23rd. Details and reservations at HollywoodCasinoCharlestown.com. Must be 21 to enter the casino floor and attend a show. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Four-time Grammy nominee Boney James performs live at Strathmore in North Bethesda, Maryland on Wednesday, April 2nd. I spoke to the jazz and R&B icon about his new album, Slow Burn, and how he became one of the most acclaimed saxophone players in the world. Hey, Boney James. Hey, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thank you, man, for having me. Appreciate it.
We are talking because you are coming to the beautiful venue, the Strathmore in North Bethesda, Maryland on April 2nd. Have you played there before? I mean, to me, it's one of the most impressive, maybe the most impressive indoor space in the area, maybe
Wow.
other than Kennedy Center, maybe, but they have so much turnover and stuff going over there in the news that maybe Strathmore might be the spot. So let's tease it. Have you ever played? It's gorgeous inside.
I have not been there. I've played so many venues in the area, and this is one that we've yet to come to, so I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, it's really really cool. I think like the National Philharmonic performs in there, and they get a bunch of cool guests like yourself. So yeah, I promise you're not going to regret it when you step in there. You're going to be like, oh yeah, that guy was right. It's amazing. um,
Nice.
Awesome. But we're here talking. This is your Slow Burn tour, of course, named after your new album, and in the title track on the album. So what came first? Did the title did you have the idea of the theme for Slow Burn first, or did you do the song? You were like, that's such a good song. Let's name the album after.
That's pretty much, that's usually my process. I write the music and then I have to, at some point, usually right before the deadline, sit down and figure out what is the vibe of each song and then try and figure out some poetic or clever way to make a title that communicates that. So the song was finished and I was just feeling the vibe of it and the word slow burn popped into my head. And I thought that sounds appropriate. And then I thought it was a good name for the whole record too. The record has a lot of the songs have that sense of percolating along and some intensity to it. And I mentioned it to the art director, and she said, "Such a great title because it really refers to your whole career. Here you
Yeah.
are, 32 years into it, and you're still growing and out here plugging along." And so I thought that clicked for me.
I love it, and I wasn't even. I mean, I listened to it in prep for this, and it works for the song and the album itself. But I wasn't thinking in terms
Yeah,
of the career. That's true
yeah.
because you have had. Let me make sure I have this right. You've had at least a dozen albums top the Billboard Jazz Albums chart, and last year in 2024, you became the first artist ever to have 20. Count them 20 number one singles on the Billboard Smooth Jazz chart. So that is a nice slow burn. You're consistent,
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah. I'm trying to just keep it going at a certain level and slow burn, and I actually looked it up in the dictionary and it says slow burn is a feeling that grows with a slow but deliberate intensity. And
Ah,
I thought that was pretty good. A
I love it.
good name for a record, a good name for a tour.
I think it's perfect for the album and the career. And maybe for this interview, but hopefully there's a slow but intentional build of intensity. Um, well, before we get into some, I do want to hit some of your career highlights, like we're saying, but I want to give the proper level of flowers and exposure to the new album. So I know Slow Burn isn't the opening track. The opening track is Arcadia, featuring the great jazz star Marcus Miller. Why
Yeah.
was that the perfect choice to kick off the album? You record all this stuff probably obviously out of order, but why was
Yes.
that? You're like, okay, we're starting with that one.
So much of the sequencing of the record, which is what you call putting the songs in order, is instinctive. I mean, really, I just wait for inspiration to strike, and then I play around with the parts. I mean, I actually in my computer make a little file and move them around like pieces, and I'm trying to showcase each song to its best level. And certain songs don't sound good coming after other songs, and
Right.
so on. But that song, I thought it made a really good statement about the record to me because it's got a jazzy quality. It has a certain depth to it. It's got Marcus Miller on it,
Yeah.
playing an acoustic bass solo, and it just had a different sound to it. It sounded fresh to me compared to some of the stuff I've done in the past. And that was what I think I wanted to communicate that this record represents. I think there's a lot of fresh and more, slightly deeper sounding music, and I wanted to showcase that.
Awesome. And then maybe time for one more deep, quote unquote, deep dive before we get into the career stuff. But how about yeah, I know it also includes a Herbie Hancock cover, the Butterfly.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's actually joined the podcast before, folks, if you want to
Oh
look him up
wow.
in the archives. Legend, right? But yeah, what about that song? You could pick any song to cover, but what about Butterfly by Herbie specifically spoke to you and said, I want to cover it this time?
I can't remember exactly what it was that reminded me of that song, but at a certain point last year, sometime before I had been started making the record, that melody just got lodged in my head, which happens sometimes. And most of the
Just
songs
humming
I
it around
cover,
the house?
I know when I would pick up my saxophone,
Yeah.
I would just start noodling with it, and I thought, wow, that's a really beautiful melody.
Yeah.
And certain songs, most of the ones that I have covered, or made my own version of other people's music over the years, start that way, where I just get a little piece of a song stuck in my head and I play it on the saxophone and I think, you know what, I've internalized it a certain way that feels like
Mhm.
it's my melody now, and I'm playing it in a way that I feel like I can bring something unique to it.
Yeah.
And this one was just like that. So every time I would pick the horn up, I'd start playing that. And so when I sat down to make a record, that's actually the first thing that I worked on. I thought, can I do a Boney James-esque arrangement of this Herbie Hancock song that sort of shows respect to the original, but
Sure.
also brings it into my world a little bit. And I think it's one of the best things I've ever made, quite frankly. I've got Corey Henry is an amazing young jazz keyboard player on there playing a solo, and Marcus is back playing bass on that song. And it has a depth and a vibe to it that I think is really special.
Wow, one of the best things you've ever made. That's
Yeah.
high praise
Yeah.
considering your career. That's
Thank you,
awesome.
man. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. All right. Well, that's the Butterfly, but let's go transport back in time to when you were, just emerging from your cocoon. So you were born. You weren't Boney James yet. You were born James Oppenheim in Massachusetts in
It's-
'61,
yeah.
but I know you spent your teen years, in the New York area,
Yeah.
just outside. So what did you, whether it was Herbie or who else, what did you grow up listening to? How'd you get bit by this bug? Not pun not intended with the butterfly, but what got bit by the jazz bug for you?
I mean, I think it was R&B was my first
Yeah.
love. That Motown music, Stevie Wonder was a big influence on me. Marvin Gaye, Curtis Mayfield. I remember the Superfly record. It was really, and all of that stuff, even though it's R&B, has a jazzy quality.
Sure.
And right around that same time, I picked up the saxophone, and then I started really tuning into the some of the great R&B saxophone sounding stuff that was happening in the 70s. So that, like Grover Washington Jr., Ronnie Laws, and the Crusaders, and, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and had a great couple of sax players in the band. And it was stuff like that that I think really, lit the musical fire inside of me.
Awesome. Didn't you start on the clarinet? Or what age did you actually switch to sax?
I started on clarinet when I was 8 and then switched to sax when I was 10. There were just too many clarinets in the band. And I only had one because that's all they had at the music store when we went to rent an instrument.
Yeah.
And the teacher leaned on me to switch to the saxophone. But as soon as I picked it up, it became my favorite thing to do, and still is today.
I love it. Awesome. And then, so moving right along, then the family. So you're mostly, East Coast, and then your family eventually moves to Los Angeles, where you get your I guess, a history degree at UCLA. And so this is a pivotal move, not only for your career, which we'll get into a second, but personal life, because you eventually, you meet your eventual wife, Lily, and get married in
Yeah,
'85. Of course, she would go on to star in ER all those years
yeah.
after that. But did you all meet in college, or was it shortly after?
It was after, well, I was still in college. She had graduated already. I was still in college, and we got fixed up by a friend, someone I knew from high school that was in a play with Lily, and here we are all these years
The
later.
rest is history. And that she did
Yeah,
go to UCLA. That's why I was
she
curious
did go
what.
to UCLA. Yeah,
That's awesome. All right. Well, congratulations and happily married all these years later. So congrats on that. We all aspire to that. All right. So then around the same time, I guess you get married in '85, and around that same time, I think you start playing with Morris Day. I guess you do some
yeah,
stuff with the Isleys.
yeah.
But it was Randy Crawford, right, that first dubbed you Boney James, not to be
Well,
confused
not
with
it
Boney M's.
wasn't Randy Crawford. It was the keyboard player in her band. I was
Oh, okay, okay.
His name is Wayne Lindsey, who's still out there doing a lot of, cool things. A
Okay.
great musician here in Los Angeles. But yeah, we were on the road with Randy. She was very successful in Scandinavia, so I think we were in Oslo, Norway, and I probably weighed 50 pounds already, less than I weigh now.
Yeah.
But I said to Wayne Lindsey, the keyboard player, I just can't eat. Everything costs too much money. He said, "Oh, you'll get too skinny. I'll have to start calling you Boney James or something." And I
Ah.
said, "Please don't call me Boney James." And that's how you get a nickname,
And it just stuck.
Yeah.
All these years later.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. All right. So obviously, so that now you got your name, and then you start putting out your first indie label release. Trust was '92, and then of course Warner Brothers, Backbone, Seduction, Sweet Thing, all that. Which won Best Jazz Album at the Soul Train Awards. So you're rocking and rolling at that. Your career is off, but throughout all of that, how important was Paul Brown? I mean, that's like the pivotal figure, producing or co-producing all those
Yeah.
early albums I just named.
Yes, yes, he was very important. I mean, he and I first met when I was in Bobby Caldwell's band in like 90, 91, and Paul at the time was an aspiring producer and was mixing front of house sound for Bobby on this Japan tour that we did, and he was hooked up with this label, Spindletop Records. So, he was about to make a record for another artist who then bailed on this label because the label was shaky. And Paul had the budget to make a record, and he called me up and he said, "Do you ever want to make a record?" And it's like, yeah, I've been trying to make a record for years, and I had been, really hustling trying to get a record deal and not had any
Yeah.
success. And 2 weeks later, we are in the studio making that Trust CD, and I didn't know anything about making records back then.
Yeah.
And Paul was very adept in the studio. So it was a really great partnership for a number of years. And then I started to learn more and more and more how things worked. And I started to have more of my own personal idea of how things should sound. And so after, 10 years or so, we parted ways after I had been co-producing. And now I've been
Yeah.
producing my own records for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
But a lot of those records were really, really great. And I'm super grateful for Paul for starting me off.
Absolutely. The great collaborator early on in your career. Hats off, or hats on right now in the interview, but hats off to Paul. And like we said, there's so many, like record numbers of chart topping hits and stuff. So there's no way we can get on them all, but I'll try to pluck out a couple that, just as a preview. Maybe you'll mix in some classics in addition to Slow Burn stuff, right? At Strathmore, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so let's hit a couple of the highlights. How about your cover of "Grazing in the Grass" with
Mhm.
Rick Braun, the great trumpet player? Does that one still hold a special place in your
Oh,
heart? Because for listeners,
absolutely.
it does.
Yeah, no, that one is become a real, sort of mainstay of the show. And I remember recording it very vividly. We that was part of a whole CD that Rick and I made together, a duet CD, which was something that Warner Brothers at the time was really known for doing, putting a lot of their artists together. George Benson and Earl Clue had made records. David Sanborn and Bob James had a big hit with an album called um, I can't remember the name.
But yours was "Shake It Up," right? Is that what?
Double Vision, Double
Double
Vision.
Vision. There you go.
Very
Not
famous record.
Foreigner, not Foreigner. A different Double Vision. Yeah.
Anyway, so my record was called Shake It Up, and so we were looking at some previous trumpet sax player duet CDs, and Grazing in the Grass, although not really a duet, did have a sax playing the melody with the trumpet. We thought this will be perfect for us, and I think we really did justice to that song. And it was a whole live session, a bunch of cats playing in the studio together, and you can feel the energy still to this day.
I love hearing about all these backstories. Thanks so much for taking the time to do so. Let's hit a couple more. And I guess you finally get your first Grammy nomination in, what was it, 2003 for Best Pop Instrumental Album for Ride. What was it about that project that you think finally caught voters' ears? Or do you think it was more just the accumulation of everyone was recognizing your work up until then? And then finally they're like, all right, let's push our chips in on Ride.
I have no insight into the Grammy voters and their mindset. I mean, it's
Yeah.
often quite mystifying, but I'm very grateful to have four nominations now, and
Yeah.
that's something that doesn't get old. I mean, I haven't won one yet. I would love
Yeah.
a statue, but being nominated for a Grammy is always been a childhood dream, I think, for most musicians, and
Yeah.
and the fact that my name came up those four times is a hoot.
Yeah, and going that very first time for Ride was probably a
Yeah.
ride on its own.
Yes, absolutely.
And what was it even more special to get that second one? Because, like you mentioned, I think it was for Pure for Best Pop Instrumental Album in 2005. And like you mentioned, that was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the first album you produced by yourself, right? So was that
Absolutely.
even more like, I mean, every time I interview artists, the Grammys, whatever, I say, is that validation? Awards are awards, whatever. It's about the art, right? But on the other hand, it probably feels special to know that you produced that yourself and you did get a second nod for something you produced.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it did mean a little bit more to me, for exactly those reasons. And it's hard to know how to feel about these things, but it is a validation.
Yeah.
It's a recognition by mostly your peers, and it's a good feeling. I'm not gonna lie, it's a good feeling. And then
Absolutely.
the one that came after that was special too because that was in an R&B category, you
The
know?
James Taylor cover, right? Don't let me be
Yeah,
lonely tonight. Gosh,
yeah.
I just went. My wife and I and her family went and saw him last year at Wolf Trap, and man, he's still got it. He's hilarious
Oh,
in between the songs.
I
James Taylor,
know.
all
Yeah.
timer. But
I actually
Why'd you want to cover "Don't Let Me Be Lonely Tonight"? That's a
Well,
classic.
actually, the Isley Brothers had done a version of it, and that
Okay,
was the inspiration for my cover
sure.
because they took that great James Taylor song and turned it into an R&B song, and then I turned it into a jazz R&B song,
Yeah.
and that was kind of what piqued my interest, and
Uh,
it just fit into that. The whole concept of that record was to try and do sort of more late night jams, and
right.
I thought that was a good one.
I like that. But your cover of James Taylor lost to Beyonce's cover of At Last, right? At a
Yes,
jam.
yes.
But there are no winners and losers. Go pick up Don't Let Me Be Lonely Tonight or stream it. It's great. All right, and then I guess we got to round it out. The most recent one was in 2014, back to pop instrumental with how do you even say it? Batucada,
Batu
the beat.
Batucada is the name of the song, but I called the record The Beat, which I believe is the English translation of the Portuguese Batucada, which is a song that was recorded by Sergio Mendes in the late 1960s. And I always loved his version, but I sort
Yeah.
of came up with a way of, bringing it into my world like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And that one was, I think, atop the Billboard Smooth Jazz charts for like 8 weeks, or I could be
Yeah.
wrong, but like it was on there for a while.
Yeah.
And one of
It's
your
a
bigger hits.
successful record. Thank you.
Well, we briefly hit all four of your Grammy nominations, but were there any in between, before, or after, in between that you personally were like, damn, how did that not get nominated? Like a personal favorite where you're like, I thought for sure this one is some of my finest work and maybe didn't get the acclaim.
I think every record that has not been nominated, I think should have been nominated.
Perfect answer. They all should have been. How about and you're generous with your time? I want to hit Future Soul at least really quick because
Hmm.
that topped the contemporary jazz charts at number one for I don't know 11 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, it
I
was a
think it was
long
the best,
one.
yeah, best selling in that genre contemporary jazz record of the year in 2015.
Yes,
I think he even went on Jimmy Fallon around that time. I don't know if it was
I
for that,
did.
but yeah. So why does that one stand out in your career? You think?
I Who can say, I mean, you never know, and I've been saying this on stage recently, you never know what song is going to be a hit or what and how it's going to resonate. And sometimes that even changes. Like the story I tell on stage now is that I've got this new record with the October London song that went top 10 on the R&B chart, but the song that I'm about to play now, which is a tune called Butter, which was on the Send When Your Love CD,
Yeah,
nobody paid any attention to it when the record came out, but now is my most streamed track
Butter
consistently.
is
Yeah,
Butter
over
is.
and over and over and over again. The song was total album cut, but people have discovered it. So who knows why and when? But I mean, Future Soul was a really strong record. I was really proud of it. There's some beautiful music on there. But why that one was so dominant at the time and made me, gave me the opportunity to go on the Tonight Show and all that other
Yeah,
stuff you mentioned. I mean, who can
yeah.
say?
Yeah, wow. So butter is your most streamed. Not to be confused
Yeah,
with butterfly or
no,
superfly, but butter.
butter,
Just butter.
butter. Yeah.
Wow. All right, everyone check it out. All right. Well, you've been generous with your time. I guess more like in closing, some more like tick we did sort of deeper dives in your career, but like bigger picture stuff like who who is do you think is on your Mount Rushmore of the greats of jazz of all time for you? That's a
Oh
hard one.
boy. That's a tough one. I mean, jazz is such a strange term too. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah, sure.
controversy about what that is,
Yeah.
but I mean, the Herbie Hancock, of course, is one of the legends. I mean, Grover Washington Jr. was always a big hero of mine.
Yeah.
The first guy that I heard that was combining the R&B and the jazz music together and doing it so beautifully. And Chick Corea, of course, was another
Right.
big influence on me. And
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely, gravitate more towards the cats that were doing it in the 70s when my ears began to open to music.
Sure. Because they are the ones that directly inspired you. Yeah, absolutely. And then how
Exactly.
about, I guess, sort of to wrap it up, how about going today of your contemporaries or, maybe the younger, newer rising? I mean, we've mentioned Miller, etc. But like, who are some of the ones we should, and there's no ranking your best in this because that's too hard.
Mhm.
It's art. But I just mean like who, if they listen to this interview, who are some other young up and coming ones that people should check out?
I gotta say, that's very difficult for me to say because
Yeah.
in as the years have gone on and I spend most of my day making music of my own, I
Yeah.
not such an avid listener as I
Sure.
used to be. So I don't really have my finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, and I can't really say.
It's hard to keep up with what all's out there when you're so immersed in making your own stuff.
Yeah,
Well, you know
it's
the ones
just
you
changed.
collaborate with, but beyond that,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's changed my relationship with music,
yeah,
becoming a professional musician in a way that's very positive for me, but
yeah.
definitely I'm different from a regular consumer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you taking the time for us. What in when it's all said and done, I'm talking like, another several decades from now because you're going to keep cranking out, the stats that I listed are going to be outdated next year because you're going to have more and more topping the charts. You'll be the one who has this many now in a couple years. But when it's all said and done looking back, what do you want your I don't want to say legacy to be, but like what do you want your own unique place to be? How do you view yourself as a unique spot within this great uh, what do we
I don't want to
history?
disappoint you, but I mean that's another thing. I never think about that stuff. I'm
Yeah,
very much a sort of, task at hand kind of cat, and I really just love the daily process of trying to improve my musicianship and improve my songwriting and improve my production, and it's a lifetime study, and and I think all that other stuff is going to have to be figured out by people other than me
yeah,
eventually.
yeah, absolutely. What's something that might surprise our listeners? Is there like a certain side of you we don't know about? Are you like an avid movie buff or a sports fan, or you know what I mean? Like what's another side outside of the music that people might be surprised? You like to cook? I don't know. What
Yeah.
do you think that might surprise people?
It's so funny because I just got off of this the cruise that I was on. I
Yeah,
co-host the cruise with Marcus and it's 20 artists and 2,000 fans,
really.
and it's a really fun thing we do twice a year.
What cruise
Um,
line is it?
it's on Celebrity. It's on the
Okay.
Celebrity Summit. It's called the Smooth Jazz Cruise.
Okay.
But I asked the other sax players, I was doing sort of a symposium, and I asked them all what their hobbies were.
Yeah,
And me, like most of them, music is still our main hobby. I mean,
of
I
course.
really still just love doing this. But when I'm not making music, I like to I play word games. I like the New York Times word games,
Nice.
and I like to read. I'm still a history buff. I have a degree in history from
Of course.
UCLA. Um,
What type of is
and
there like an area of history? Is it American history or like medieval or what slice?
when I was studying, it was mostly American history, but now I just like reading historical books or novels or nonfiction books, and I'm studying Spanish in my spare time on the
Ooh,
road.
all right. All right. Are you
So I'm
fluent
trying to
yet or you're
no,
working on
no,
it?
I'm just working on it. It's more of a hobby than a goal,
I love it.
but those are the things I keep me busy when I'm traveling from gig to gig.
I love it. All right. You're going to be bilingual soon. All right. Well, music is the universal language, especially instrumental stuff. Like, it reaches everybody all across the globe. So everybody has to check out Boney James at the Strathmore in North Bethesda, Maryland on April 2nd. I'm telling you, it's when you walk in there, it's a really impressive space. So
Can't wait to see it.
I'm envy you getting to experience it for the first time again.
I love theaters of that type, honestly.
Yeah.
Classy joints, I refer to them as.
It's definitely a classy joint. And you're a classy fella yourself. So, hey, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.